NBA championship.
Deliver the Alamo. The San Antonio Spurs are NBA World Champions.
The third time in 7 seasons. Fourth title in 9 years.
To think about having done this 5 times, it's amazing to be a part of this for so long.
Speaking of LA, we've got John Ireland and Steve Mason here from our ESPN LA radio station. And breaking news this morning on ESPN, San Antonio Spurs forward Tim Duncan has announced he will retire after 19 seasons with the organization. Since drafting Duncan, the Spurs won 5 championships and posted a .710 winning percentage, which is the best 19-year stretch in NBA history. Obviously one of the greatest. But, John, where does he rank amongst the greatest?
He, Jen, put simply, is the best power forward ever to play in the NBA, ever. His competition would be Karl Malone or Kevin Garnett. He's better than both of them. And Jen mentioned that statistic, that his winning percentage with the Spurs was .710. That's not only the greatest 19-year winning percentage in NBA history, it's the greatest winning percentage for any individual in any major sport. He is the absolute benchmark for power forwards from this day moving forward. And he did it quietly. He did it efficiently. His nickname was perfect, the big fundamental. You would look down and the guy would have 21 points and 20 rebounds, and he would just kill you. And I'll tell you, I feel for the people in San Antonio because when we lost Kobe, it was a sad day. They're losing Duncan. There is nothing, guys, that I can say negative about Tim Duncan. He was excellent defensively. He was first-team all-defense 11 or 12 years. He was the best offensive player. He made it through 4 reincarnations of the Spurs. First, he won a title with Robinson. Then he won a title with Manu and Tony when Tony was the best player. They won a title when he was the best player. He won a title when Kawhi was the best player. Just the ultimate team guy and ultimate respect for that guy.
And amazingly, he won championships in 3 different decades.
Sure did.
Nobody else has ever done that. 17 consecutive seasons of 50-plus wins in San Antonio. All-time record. No other team has ever done that. You know, his knock is that he isn't big enough a personality, right? He is very quiet. He's the big fundamental. I don't think anybody really appreciates. Anybody think is he a good Twitter follow? Probably not.
I would doubt he's on
not
Twitter.
Even on Twitter.
Yeah.
Does he have a Facebook page? Probably not. So I think for this generation of younger NBA fans, he's like, hey, he's the old boring guy. He's the old. It's not the big fundamental. It's the big bore. But the reality is that he never worried about brand. He never worried about being on magazine covers. He never worried about having attention. He wasn't an attention fame seeker. He just wanted to do his job, and he did it unbelievably well.
Want to hear a Tim Duncan fact that'll surprise you guys? Pierced tongue.
Oh, that's...
Tim Duncan has a pierced tongue.
Do we really need that?
All right. Another great Duncan story. Yeah. When he was, and this exemplifies what a great player Duncan was. His second year in the NBA, he couldn't shoot free throws. He was a Shaquille O'Neal-like 50% free throw shooter. He went out, shot them every day, worked himself up, and at the end of his career, he was a 70% free throw shooter. So he just had no weakness.
Here's another, there's another one people don't know. Superman tattoo right on the front of his shoulder.
It is unusual to see somebody...
No, I just made that up.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know what to say to that.
That would be so anti-Duncan.
It is unusual, though.
Well, what, the pierced tongue thing you wouldn't have believed?
No, never.
To see someone so universally revered in their sport, is that because of the way he carried himself?
I think it's because of his talent. I mean, he was just, Jen, he was better at this than anybody else. I mean, what's the comp to Tim Duncan? Malone, you know, ran the floor better, was a better scorer than Duncan, but Duncan was a better defender and a better rebounder. Garnett was a spectacular defender and had a couple of years where he was maybe better than Duncan, but Duncan, Steve, was count on him every night for 20 years.
And there was also an unselfishness about Duncan. Like, he didn't care that Tony ran the team one year. He didn't care that Kawhi emerged and ran the team. He was totally happy and comfortable doing his role as his role continued to change over the years.
And Greg Popovich.
And took less money. That's the other thing. Yeah. He took less money to stay in San Antonio and allow them to bring in a new crop of talent and a great role model and a great model, I think, for younger players who went to San Antonio.
And Greg Popovich says, guys, that because he had Tim Duncan, he was able to create that culture. Because Duncan did all those things that Steve talked about. When they went to him halfway through his career and says, Tony Parker is going to be the one on this team now. You've been the one for 7 or 8 years. Tony's talent demands it. He's going to be the one. They go to the finals. They win it. Tony's the NBA Finals MVP. When Kawhi got there, when LaMarcus Aldridge got there last year, they said, Tim, you got to go into the background. And because your best player was willing to do that and your best player was coachable, it made everybody else follow the leader. And Duncan was the leader, and they had that culture, and that's how they built 20 years of success in San Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, and that egolessness, I believe that's a term, egolessness,
I think we finally made up a word,
that Golden State has. Really, the first time we saw it was with San Antonio in actually many years, but in 2014. You look, and everybody says, oh, that was a boring team. You know what? That was a beautiful team to watch. They moved the basketball. They were unselfish. They played a high-test kind of defense. And so, yes, the rap is they're boring. They're not boring if you're a basketball fan. John, you watch so many more basketball games than I do. That is beautiful basketball.
And the 2014 team you talked about was the birth of the Warriors.
Yes.
You know, Steve Kerr basically took that and said, okay, we're going to put that in Golden State. And here's another thing that's just so typical of Duncan. Tomorrow, they're going to have a press conference in San Antonio announcing Duncan's retirement, and Duncan will not be there. It will be just Greg Popovich talking about Duncan. He just didn't care, Jen, about getting the credit or who got the credit. He just wanted to win, be a part of a winning team, and he was the best player, and everybody knew it. And it didn't matter that he didn't have, like Steve talked about, a brand.
Yeah.
He may be the last athlete we see that is a brandless athlete.
Tomorrow, will Popovich cry?
No.
Will he tear up?
No.
Will he be emotional?
Here's why.
Yeah.
Greg Popovich used to be the coach at the Air Force Academy, and Greg knows people that kids he coached who have gone off to war and died. He likes to say, hey, man, we're in the toy store of life. I'd be very surprised if he teared up. He's a military tough guy.
I do appreciate that you answered all of his questions with one-word answers in Pop fashion. Bravo to you on that one.
Yes.
It is very difficult to quantify why someone is successful, but where do you think the consistency that he had with Greg Popovich as a head coach for his career there, where do you think that ranks as far as why he was successful?
Well, I think that
it didn't hurt that he went to college for 4 years.
No, he did go to college, went to Wake Forest for 4 years. I think organizations are great. Teams are great when there is perfect alignment between ownership, coach, and star player. And they absolutely had that. The fact that Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich built such a degree of trust. Duncan became Popovich on the floor. He was the embodiment of the kind of basketball that he wanted his team to play.
And I'm sure Pop will say this tomorrow, Jen, because he could yell at Duncan and Duncan would take it, because Duncan was coachable, it allowed Pop to yell at everybody else, and that's how they got that alignment that Steve's talking about. We may not see another player like Tim Duncan ever, a guy who just doesn't care about commercials or media or brand and wins every year. 50 wins every year. I mean, who does that? Not even Kobe. I mean, it's an unbelievable career. Kudos to Tim Duncan. Wow.
Yeah, I would say I would love to debate and say something bad and then stick to my position and then yell at John. But in this particular case,
what do you say bad about him?
There's nothing you can say.
Nope.
Like, what is the other side of this?
Universally
argument?
Respected too by everybody in the NBA.
Yeah, and that is, as we said earlier in the show, very rare. So we are certain that the respect will continue to pour in for Tim Duncan as he announces his retirement from the league after 19 seasons. Moving on.
Tim Duncan's the best forward.
Timmy is the ultimate professional, extremely intelligent basketball player.
He's not flamboyant. He's not out trying to say that he's the #1 guy. He kind of just plays in the background, but everyone knows that's the reason for all his success is because of Tim.
Tim Duncan, 19 years in the NBA, all with the Spurs, 15 times an all-NBA performer, 5 times an NBA champion, calling it a career. Tim didn't take up basketball till his freshman year in high school, born in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. He was a competitive swimmer in his early years. In fact, at one point was the top-ranked competitor in the United States in a 400-meter swim. But how about this? Mark Cuban on Duncan's retirement now, tweeting, upset at Tim Duncan. We didn't get to honor him at a Mavs-Spurs game. Happy I've had the opportunity to witness his greatness so often. No one gets the opportunity to honor Tim Duncan because that's the Tim Duncan way. Joining us now, Antonio Daniels, a teammate of Tim Duncan's during his San Antonio Spurs years of Antonio's career. So, Antonio, I'm sure you've got a lot of Tim Duncan stories, and I'm sure you tell them frequently. What is your favorite Tim Duncan story from your years together?
My favorite Tim Duncan story is when, we were roommates together in the Chicago Rookie Combine. I don't know if it was Daniels, Duncan, alphabetical order, but we were roommates together. So he was drafted first, I was drafted fourth. Throughout our whole rookie year, we kind of kept in contact a little bit here and there. I went to Vancouver. He obviously came to San Antonio. I did a basketball camp in Vancouver after my rookie year. And I came home to Columbus, Ohio. I walked in my mom's house, and she said, "Hey, Tim's on the phone." And I was like, "Well, Tim who?" And she said, "I don't know. Tim's on the phone." So I pick up the phone, and it's Tim Duncan. And he says, "Hey, man, I heard you got traded to San Antonio." I said, "Well, I didn't know that." He said, "Yeah, you're coming down here to San Antonio to play with me." So I got traded after my rookie year from Vancouver to San Antonio. I didn't hear from my agent. I didn't hear from anyone else. The first one that I heard it from was Tim.
That's a great story. Your new teammate giving you a call to tell you that you've been traded. During your playing years with Tim, we really, in the media and even fans, hardly get to know Tim because that's the way he is. He's private, he's a quiet guy. What is Tim Duncan like? Away from basketball, what kind of person is he?
He's a great person, and he has a huge personality. That's what a lot of people don't understand, and you just said it, Jay. That's the way he wants it. When he's in front of the cameras, Tim is who he is. He's kind of quiet, he's kind of reserved, but when you put those cameras aside, there's not a man that you will meet on the face of the earth that has a bigger sense of humor and personality than Tim Duncan has.
I find that ironic because we never got to see that. When you say sense of humor, is he a practical joker? What was...
Big time.
Really?
Big time. Huge practical joker. Anything you think about when someone has a sense of humor, very quick-witted, very intelligent. And that's why when people talk about this retirement, that's why he took his time to come to this point. This wasn't an emotional decision. He took his time. He's very calculated in his thinking. He's very intelligent in his thought process. So when it comes down to retirement, it's a very difficult decision for anyone to come to. And for him to take this amount of time, what can you say? You salute him for what he's done for this city of San Antonio and for the Spurs organization.
Antonio, how did he make you better as a basketball player?
Well, he taught me how to play with a star. That's when I first learned what it meant to play with a star, a guy of that magnitude. And not only did he make me better as a player, he made me better as a person. Because when you talk about the term professional athlete, what gets left out a lot is the professional part. Mm-hmm. And when I got traded here to San Antonio, to have an opportunity to sit behind Tim Duncan and learn, and Avery Johnson, and David Robinson, and Steve Kerr, Mario Elie, Sean Elliott, Terry Porter, Jerome Kersey, all these guys taught me what it meant to be a professional athlete. When Pop cursed him out the first day that I go to practice, and Pop dressed him down in front of everybody, Tim did not reply. He didn't bat an eye. He said, "Yes, sir," and went on about his business. So now, if that's Tim Duncan, the rookie of the year that's getting dressed down and cursed out by Greg Popovich, and he's not responding, how can I, being the 7th or 8th man, reply when Pop dresses me down? So Tim set an example from the moment that he came here to San Antonio throughout his 19-year career.
And you were lucky enough to be on championship teams with the San Antonio Spurs, the 1999 championship there. When you say that Tim Duncan was listening to Pop dress him down and not responding, not replying, just taking it as a good teammate, how much of Tim's role, not just on the floor, how much of his role was as a leader with those Spurs teams?
That was his role. And usually you say a guy is a leader by what he does on the floor. And Tim led off the floor. He led off the floor. His quiet demeanor. And this is why this retirement this way does not surprise me, because it sets a tone and it sets a standard for the San Antonio Spurs organization and the way that they go about their business. You know, Tim is quiet, and he's leaving the same way that he played the game. Mm-hmm. He's going to dominate, but he's going to leave very quietly. I've said all year when people have asked me, is Tim retiring? I don't know. But if he does retire, there won't be a huge celebration. Tim would just wake up one day and tell Greg Popovich or the sports organization, you know what, I'm done. You guys gone without me. Thank you for the years. And that will be the end of it, because that's who Tim Duncan is. He's about setting a tone and about setting a standard, but not just for himself, for those that are coming after him.
What's next for Tim? What can you see him doing in his post-playing days?
You know, now the interesting thing is, I sent him a message this morning, and I told him now life begins. For a professional athlete, this is where life begins, because now there's such a transition in everything that you're doing. Now you're a full-time father. You're a full-time husband. You know, now you're home all the time. There are no more road trips where you're gone for 6 or 7 days at a time. Now you're home. Now you're home. So with Tim, he is a big-time family man. A huge family man. He loves his children. So this is a great opportunity now for him to embrace those times that he couldn't be with his children because he was out on the road, and be that father that the Lord has called him to be. So I'm proud of him. I am proud of him. I don't know what's next for his transition, the transition to the next phase of life, but I know I'm proud of all that he's accomplished in his 19-year career, and proud of what the Lord has him moving forward with as well.
13 years in the league for you, Antonio. During your time in the league, where would you say Tim ranks in terms of, and we know being a professional is at the top of his calling card, but how will he be remembered? Over the last 2 decades, how does he fit in with the other greats?
Jay, I tell you how he should be remembered. He should be remembered as the best teammate in professional sports history.
Really?
And I'm not saying that, yes, and I'm not saying that because he's a friend. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that with this in mind. You think of a player that has sacrificed more for a city or for an organization than Tim Duncan has. What he has done to allow this Spurs organization to have sustained success for this amount of time, putting his ego to the side, passing the torch to someone else, taking less money to bring in other players. That's not something that's done by stars of Tim Duncan's magnitude. And that's been, you can see that through other guys in this league. And when I say Tim Duncan sets a standard, he sets a standard. He has brought a culture to the city of San Antonio. It's this, him being in San Antonio, him being drafted by San Antonio. They're like soulmates. Because the people of San Antonio are hard-working, blue-collar people who don't live in the limelight. And Tim Duncan is that same exact way. Yeah. He's hard-working, behind the scenes. He does what he has to do, and he doesn't live in the limelight. You know what? I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm going to come in. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to set an example, and I'm going to go home. He should be remembered as the best teammate in professional sports history.
Wow. Big praise from Antonio Daniels. It's interesting looking back. Magic Johnson was the perfect fit for the Los Angeles Lakers. Tim Duncan, the perfect fit for the San Antonio Spurs. Let me ask you this. Can you see in Tim's future either coaching in the NBA or perhaps front office work in the NBA? Is he that kind of a guy, or will he want to just move on to something else?
That would be very, very difficult to see, you know, him. It's really the coaching part, because when you coach, you have to wear a suit on the bench, and I know he wouldn't want to do that. It would be different if he was coaching in, like, the Hawaii Classic, and you get an opportunity to wear kind of button-up polos. But, you know, the coaching part, I know he would not want to wear a suit coat on the bench for 82 games a year. So, but, you know, with Tim, he's a relationship person. You know, he enjoys the relationship that he's built with guys over time. So I don't know, maybe a part in the front office where he can still come around, say hello to guys, interact with guys, and so on and so forth. But, you know, as far as coaching is concerned, that would be very difficult to see.
The image that comes to mind, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was an MVP trophy. Tim showed up in jeans and a T-shirt. That was just who he was. That was who he was. Antonio, terrific. We really appreciate your insight. 13 years in the NBA, 4 of those seasons as teammates with Tim Duncan, who is retiring today after 19 years in the league. Antonio, always good to catch up. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Jay, thanks you for having me, brother.
You bet.